Your trusted source for news and analysis about Chicago White Sox prospects and player development, covering the Major League Baseball draft and international market, plus the action in Kannapolis, Winston-Salem, Birmingham, and Charlotte. This is the FutureSox podcast with your hosts, Mike Rankin and James Fox.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the FutureSox podcast. My name is Mike Rankin. I'm your host alongside James Fox. We are on the Broadcast Basement Network. Thanks so much, Chris Lanuti. If you're new here, we release multiple episodes a week on the FutureSox podcast, so we implore you to subscribe, comment, leave us a review. We do individual player interviews. Elijah Evans has plenty on tap for you. Jake Peppers is the latest. Also talked to Jacob Burt. Seth Keener is another player that Elijah talked to, and there's more coming. So a lot of insight on the prospects from their perspective, which is really fun. And then on Fridays, we also do the FutureSox Roundup, which we take a more in-depth look on individual performances and storylines across the organization. Right now, you are listening to the FutureSox podcast, which we release on Tuesdays. James Fox is back. We're talking changes because we're focusing in on what Chris Getz wants to do, is doing, and try to anticipate some of the plans that the White Sox are going to undertake as the offseason gets cooking. And, of course, 2024, we're looking ahead to next season. A lot to get to today outside of just that. We're talking instructs roster. That's players participating in sort of a controlled environment under the watchful eyes of White Sox instructors. So that'll be something that we want to monitor as well, because a lot of key young first-year players are going to be involved. Also, we have some draft information and Arizona Fall League performances. So we'll get to all of it. First, let's discuss some of the changes already, James, that are being made within the organization. So there's a few things that we should start with. Reported, Jose Castro and Daryl Boston out. Jose Castro, hitting coach. Daryl Boston, longtime outfield and first base coach. He's out. Curt Hasler, he's been in the organization since 1987. Draft pick, moved on to a role evaluating minor league talent, and then got promoted to bullpen coach in 2017. He is being reassigned. And Chris Johnson, who was the hitting coach in Charlotte last year, well, I guess 2 years ago, right? However you want to perceive last year. But in 2023, Chris Johnson was promoted to the big league club as the assistant hitting coach. He will also be reassigned. So Chris Getz doing some things. And we also learned that Andy Barkett is out of the organization. He is no longer with the Chicago White Sox. And we'll detail that move a little bit more because it has a lot to do with what's been made already following all the front office hires that Chris Getz had already done. So, James, there's a lot there already. First and foremost, let's begin with Jose Castro, the hitting coach, being moved out of the organization after just one season. This one kind of hit me hard. I think it was disappointing to see, following Steverson and, Frank Menachino, they go to Jose Castro, and I was at least looking to hang my hat on something with the Chicago White Sox coaching staff if they're going to establish some sort of cohesion and consistency and give me a hitting coach that I can buy into. Well, one season of Jose Castro and he's out. What do you make of the move?
Well, I know that there were some rumors like all year that there were just like conflicting voices, right? But that's like not terribly surprising. Like, I feel like having one hitting coach in 2023 is a little bit crazy anyway. This is something that Chris Lanuti actually talked about on the Sox in the Basement show, where it just seems like, you always hear how much of a psychologist these guys have to be and how it's one of the most difficult jobs in sports, and then you expect like one or two people to coach like 13 or 14 guys. So, I think there were some guys that probably gravitated towards Chris Johnson for some of the data, and there were other guys that liked, Castro, and I think Mike Tozar was around, which is like probably the more interesting part here. Like Mike Tozar and Pedro Grifol are really good friends. Tozar's been a hitting coach in the past. He does private hitting stuff like down in Miami. Like, I don't know if this just means that they're just going to insert Mike Tozar as hitting coach, and maybe these other guys like weren't necessarily Grifol hires from the beginning. They were maybe like foisted upon him by Rick Hahn and Ken Williams. I don't really know. I mean, like the offense was atrocious. How much of that is like up to the hitting coach? I don't know, but it does seem like, just organizational change in general from Chris Getz with the Barquette move too, which like is a little bit disheartening, right? I think some of the stuff that Andy Barquette was doing in the minor leagues, I thought was pretty good. And, for anybody that wants some more information there, Ian Eskridge, our buddy over at White Sox Daily, did an interview with Andy. So, please check that out and look for it. We talked a little bit pre-show, Mike, like I'm just curious to see if Chris Getz now hires like the Brian Bannister version, like for hitting, and they have this like overarching like hitting philosophy that'll be top down, and then you hire a coordinator and go from there essentially. So obviously like lots of changes coming to the hitting side. The other stuff, I think, not terribly surprising. Curt Hasler's been in the organization for a long time. I mean, with the hire of Brian Bannister, my guess is, he and Ethan Katz, just bring somebody else in there as like the bullpen coach, assistant pitching coach. There might be some other names in there as well. I know Matt Zaleski's very well thought of. Maybe he moves into that coordinator role. Who knows? I think we'll hear some of this stuff, I think, throughout the month of October. And then Daryl Boston, I think there were a lot of people that kind of thought he wouldn't make it onto Pedro Griffol's staff in the first place. He's one of the Kenny Williams hanger-ons, like we've kind of alluded to on previous shows, and he won't be the last one. But I mean, look, the outfield defense has not been great for a long time. And, I guess I had heard that Boston provided comic relief and stuff, and he got along with the players. But I mean, if you're Pedro Grifol at this point and like Chris Getz, like there's really no reason to have Daryl Boston around anymore. So yeah, they'll be looking for an outfield instructor and first base coach. But yeah, I mean, these are just, it's some of the stuff that bad teams do, but some of the things that I was looking for is just, org philosophy type stuff, right? Like I was really happy with the Bannister hire. If they can do something on the hitting side, then this stuff will make like a little bit more sense, I would think, and we should have some clarity on it, I would think, by the end of the month.
And again, just to go over it, Brian Bannister, senior advisor to pitching. Gene Watson, director of player personnel, came over from the Royals. Josh Barfield, assistant general manager, former Diamondbacks director of player development. Barfield and Getz, similar timelines in their career in the front office. Of course, playing time as well. So kind of like-minded in that regard. And I was encouraged to hear Josh Barfield, when he spoke to the media, kind of had some of the things that I was expecting him to be said. In terms of just having a fresh look, a modern look, just a kind of a newer approach to going about building an organization. Not saying that he's going to revolutionize the game. It's just he's kind of accelerating the timeline a little bit and getting the talent to the modern era. And when I say modern era, it's not like the White Sox are in the Stone Age. It's more of expanding the front office, expanding resources to catch up to some of the other teams, and utilizing the advantages that are being had around the league that the White Sox just don't either dedicate enough eyes or personnel to, or just flat out don't feel like doing it. So, I mean, that's just a minor detail. All of these things kind of play into how the White Sox can become a winning organization. All that being said, the Chris Johnson, Curt Hasler reassignments I thought were a little bit noteworthy. The Daryl Boston boot, it was a long time coming. The Jose Castro thing, just disappointing considering it's just one and done, and the hitting coaches have filtered in and out of Chicago. And I think something that should also be mentioned too is what Chris Getz wants in his players, James, like what type of team that the White Sox are going to be to compete. I'd love to throw it to you here, because if you're trying to win in today's baseball game, Chris Getz is pushing for athleticism, players who can play multiple positions, who are fast on their feet, ball and play type mentality. I just wonder if that is sort of where the game is headed now, and if you think that just in general that philosophy is a successful formula.
Yeah, I think so. I think like power pitching and athletes is like a tale as old as time, right? And it goes back to like your 90s Braves and that's where Dayton Moore came from. So it's it's kind of is like what he like attempted to bring to the Royals, like with Gene Watson. Look, I mean, it sounds good, right? But like athletic players that can do lots of things are expensive. So, they're probably going to have to draft and develop them and possibly trade for them. I mean, they have one in center field, obviously. Everybody's hoping that they have one coming at shortstop, who we'll probably get into a little bit here. But yeah, no, I mean, I get it, right? I think, it sounds good that maybe they want to go away from just like some of the redundancies and go back to, have some positional versatility instead of just, trying to find bats that all play the same positions essentially. But I mean, it's going to take a little bit. Like I'm sure Chris Getz does have a vision, but you're using the pocketbook of Jerry Reinsdorf with a system that is improved, as we've talked about. It's like a middle of the pack system, but it's not loaded with like close to the big leagues position players by any means, right? So that's one of the issues. And so I think this is like a fascinating offseason with, Chris Getz and Gene Watson and all these new lieutenants like kind of leading the charge. I don't expect them to be really married to anyone, but that doesn't mean that they can just like turn around and like trade these underachieving guys and get guys that are good and better, right? It's like, oh, get rid of these guys and get new guys. It's like, okay, that sounds wonderful, but like in the case of like an Eloy Jimenez, right? Like you might be better off like keeping Eloy Jimenez and just making him your DH if you're not going to get like good stuff in return for him. And I just as these guys get more expensive, I think it's just like less likely that you're gonna get like the returns that some people are perceiving that you're gonna get. So yep, just like another layer of what should be a pretty interesting offseason, I think, just because it's going to be different.
Yeah, I think there needs to be more time. There needs to be more talent put into the farm system. I think it's clear that the direction is to bank on the farm system's development. Shout out Mike Shirley. In reference to what we were talking about regarding Chris Getz's philosophy, it comes from an article written by Scott Merkin. And a couple of quotes I want to throw you, and then we can move on to some instructs and Arizona Fall League stuff. He told Merck there isn't an obvious recipe to regain an edge. There's professionalism, there's loyalty, there's execution. Those are the three big pillars I often point to. So professionalism, loyalty, execution. Okay. Now, when it comes to adding to what's on the field, they're looking to be more athletic. He says, we're a team that needs to get more athletic. We've seen some of the base running that's been frustrating, whether that be related to effort or the ability to actually take the extra base. All things that are being evaluated and most likely need to be adjusted. So there's just a little bit behind the mind. It's going to be telling on some of the moves that he decides to make in 24, because it does tell us more about the long-term plans. So when it comes to front office stuff, how exciting is this? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're a White Sox fan, what else can you be asking for? Us talking about front office hires and speculating about the future, not even excited about 2024, just looking ahead to maybe possibly being good in 2025. And I think the conversation leads exactly to where we're headed, and that's the instructs roster. Arizona White Sox have graciously provided information about some of the players who are going to be in instructs, and we'd like to talk about them, because it's important to recognize that guys who are in their first season, period, their draft season, get more experience. They play either high school or a long college season, short time maybe in professional baseball, like full season single A. But most of these guys are getting time in the Arizona Complex League, and there's a lot of them. You add on just a little bit more in a controlled environment to their seasons, it allows them to get a head start onto their professional careers, considering it's a little test trial. They're learning what it means to be a professional, get into the offseason on a program provided by the organization along with individual trainers, right? I mean, organizations, I'm sure, communicate with the players, and the players tell them who they're working with in the offseason. But there is a design in which the organization wants to have a player follow a specific formula in order to get their body in the shape that they believe is most advantageous. And as we look at some of these names, James, Jake Eater is participating in the Arizona Fall League, but it looks like he's going to be maybe involved in instructs. But others include Matthias Lacombe, a fun name to mention. Jake Peppers is also going to be there. I encourage you to listen to the interview done by Elijah Evans, as that is released already on the FutureSox podcast network. Christian Opper, we consider him a prep pitch, but a one-year JUCO player. Some of those pitchers, James. Let's stick with the pitchers first before we move on to some of the position players that you're looking forward to covering in Instructs. Anybody that jumps out to you in terms of the arms that are participating? Norge Vera, too. I want to mention him.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think like obviously the most interesting name there is Noah Schultz, who everybody kind of talked about. I don't know, how much he's pitched out there. There hasn't been like a ton of video or anything of instructional league, but like he's definitely on the roster. I'm pretty sure Jake Eater was listed on the roster just because he left Birmingham early and pitched in Arizona. I'm guessing some in instructs before heading out to the Arizona Fall League. So he'll actually throw in the Arizona Fall League on the 10th, which is, today as this podcast releases. So there's that. And then like it's just like a lot of younger arms, that are from the most recent draft. Zach Franklin was a 10th round reliever out of Missouri. He's there. Anthony Imhoff and Matthias Lacombe were both JUCO pitchers that were drafted out of Arizona. I know Matthias Lacombe, he got like basically 7th round money, $450,000 in round 12. So he's pretty interesting. Maximo Martinez is there, who was acquired from the Dodgers for international bonus pool space. And then like you've talked about Christian Opor, Jake Peppers, who, Elijah talked to. Yeah, so those are just, some of the names from the recent draft class mostly. And then Norge Vera is getting a chance to pitch there as well. We kind of talked about how important of a year it was for him. And then, it was kind of another lost season for him, just with lots of injuries, not enough innings. So, but he's still out there. We'll see how that goes. I'm sure we'll have some instructional league reports. It's, a lot of instruct stuff is what Baseball America bases like some of their preseason rankings on. So, and I know you want to get into some of the position players. One other thing I'll mention, like a scout reached out and I had a couple of questions too. And I also talked to our guy, Bill Mitchell, from Baseball America that hops on just about like the lack of Dominican and Venezuelan players like on this roster, like some of the most recent signings from the DSL. And you could also read my preview on our website, or my review, I guess, of the DSL season. So a lot of those young promising hitters that we've talked about and discussed are not in Arizona yet, just because, the way that this has kind of gone with the bonus pools. Most teams are leaving their players in the Dominican Republic since they sign in January. Like they take a really heavy bonus hit like anytime this year. So since it's October, they just leave them in the DSL to get their full bonus. They'll come stateside likely January, February for spring training, my guess is. And, some of these guys who, I've got questions on will be in minor league spring training in February, and then they'll likely go on to play at Arizona. And look, some of them could even like leap Arizona altogether and end up in Kannapolis. One name I'll mention, is Venezuelan infielder, 17-year-old Javier Magoyan. Pretty sure that's how you spell it, but 199 plate appearances in 47 games. He hit 10 homers in the DSL, which is significant. 315, 417, 582, the WRC plus of 156. So like Ben Badler has spoken about him. I've heard, whatever this means, there's buzz on him, like scouts have said. So I think people are just curious to see him come stateside and see what happens. We've seen guys do well in DSL like Jose Rodriguez, and then it translates over. We've seen others, Benjamin Bailey among them, and even like another guy, like Arnold Prado and some other guys we might mention that have kind of come over and not done much. So who knows? But, 10 home runs with, a 13% walk rate, I think is pretty significant for a guy that had some sleeper hype like coming into the season.
Well, you talked about buzz. I remember you telling me about Ryan Burroughs and the interest that scouts had around the league, and he's among the infielders who will be participating in instructs. So wanted to make mention of that. Ryan Galaney as well. Galaney is on tap to be posted on our platform. Elijah has an interview scheduled with Galaney, so that'll be cool to look ahead. Jordan Sprinkle as well. Sprinkle athletically gifted as a defender. Really want to see him put bat to ball more often. And some of the outfielders, Drake Logan, Riku Nishida, Eddie Park, you mentioned Arnold Prado. George Wolkow is there for the fans out there. I know we're all really excited about George Wolkow, Caden Connor. The infielders, Ryan Burroughs, Edric Felix, Ryan Galaney, Mikey Kane, Jordan Sprinkle. So, and the catchers, why not? Let's mention the catchers as well. Weston Eberle, Ronnie Hernandez, Luis Pineda, and Dominic Tamez. So those are your names. And Instructs, I think, is just a wonderful. I love the idea of Instructs. You get these players together in a controlled environment, and you allow White Sox personnel to evaluate them up close, and they're not at full season professional baseball where there's a schedule and it's obviously regimented. So I think it's just a nice laid back opportunity for these prospects to be evaluated in a fair and otherwise controlled environment. So I'm always a fan. Whenever Schaumburg around in 2020 did the alternate site, I thought baseball needed to do more of it. And ever since then with Instructs, I felt like it's been a positive development in the way prospects get better at baseball. All right, let's move on to the draft. James, you have any other thoughts? Otherwise, because we can get to the Arizona Fall League, and we also have to talk about the draft. So before the draft, let's talk a little bit more about the Arizona Fall League, because we did mention Jake Eder. He did have an outing already. He's pitching his second Arizona Fall League outing, the 10th, like we mentioned today, if you're listening on the release. But outside of that, position players, not really jumping off the page at you. Brian Ramos smoked a ball in the gap. That was the highlight of the first week for White Sox position players. But carry on, James. Arizona Fall League action.
Yeah, I mean it's it's week 2 coming of the Arizona Fall League. Jake Eder scheduled to pitch. Obviously I think I saw that he like made the Baseball America hot list for the first week, like in the Fall League, or BA's hot sheet essentially. So, that's interesting. I know he looked pretty good. He only threw 3 innings, I believe. But, I think that's okay for like a first outing. One of the interesting things about Eder was like with all the hype that he got, like he showed up to Birmingham and he kind of really struggled. And then the White Sox had kind of, said that he was, they were making some changes to him and he was trying to get his body in line. So he did. He had 3 strikeouts and 3 walks and 3 innings pitched in his first appearance. Baseball America said that, they just kind of went over the trade, that he was the cost for the Marlins, to get Jake Berger. The Vanderbilt bred lefty returned to the mound after having Tommy John surgery in 21. He was one of the biggest revelations in the minor leagues and was dominating Double-A in his first pro season. So hopefully he can continue on just like with some of the success, and we can get something good out of the Arizona Fall League here. And then you mentioned the position players had struggled. The other guy that's interesting, Jordan Leisure, fireballing reliever, who the White Sox got from the Dodgers in the Lance Lynn trade. I think we see him absolutely in 2024 in Chicago. So, you can keep following along with the Arizona Fall League. There is a feed that you can find where you can like watch some of the games online, and hopefully Brian Ramos and Colson Montgomery pick it up a little bit and start playing pretty well. But they're in the Glendale Desert Dogs lineup pretty much every day along with Jacob Burke.
Yeah, Jacob Burke is a lot of fun to watch patrolling the outfield. He's made already a play or two in center. Brian Ramos typically at third base, Montgomery playing shortstop. Just to round out the Arizona Fall League list, reliever Addison Coffey, great story. Right-handed pitcher Yosimar Kuzin, remember he was a late season international signing, advanced in age. This is somebody that the White Sox are going to aggressively push, but he's struggled so far. the aforementioned Eater. Frazier Ellard already threw a couple of outings, left-handed reliever. He's older as well. And of course, like James mentioned, Jordan Leisure. So those are your White Sox participants in the Arizona Fall League. I encourage you to also read Trending on the Farm this week, as our guy Sleepy Harold, aka Steve Hasman, put together a recap of White Sox performance. So if you want that in print, go to FutureSox.com and check it out. It gives you the information, as well as what James mentioned earlier. The Dominican Summer League review of 2023 is up. So if you want more information about the young prospects, make sure that you're reading on FutureSox.com. We have all the affiliate reviews as well. I encourage you to also subscribe to the podcast if you like what you're hearing. Okay, we have more to come, as the Chicago White Sox are officially selecting 4th in the draft, James. However, that's only rounds 2 through 20, because there's a draft lottery and the White Sox are qualified potentially to get the first pick. So that's that. I know you wanted to talk about the significance of the 4th pick in rounds 2 through 20, but also what the draft lottery could mean for the White Sox status in the first round.
Yeah, so they finished with the 4th worst record in baseball somehow, even though it was a god-awful season where they lost 101 games. There were 3 teams worse than them. So essentially it just means that, they have like 13.5% chance at the number 1 pick. So, with the 3 teams in front of them all have a 16.5% chance. Who knows? They could pick anywhere. Like essentially like 10 is the lowest that they could pick, because so Major League Baseball takes, I think it's all 18 of the non-playoff teams. They have a lottery, 18 through 1. And they draw the top 6, and then after that it goes by record. So we won't find out the White Sox first pick until day 2 of the winter meetings, I believe, but they will pick 4th overall in rounds 2 through 20. So, there's some certainty on that front. One interesting note is like the White Sox as a large market club, they're not able to pick in the top 10 2 years in a row. Like if they pick top 6, it's very strange. So essentially, if the White Sox pick in the top 6 in 2024, so in this lottery, the highest they can pick in 2025 is pick 11, which is weird. But if they happen to fall out of that top 6 range and pick 7th, they can pick wherever in 2025. So like I've seen it mentioned, like this isn't that great of a draft class. I've seen some people wonder whether they'd be better off picking like 7th, so then they'd still be in line for the number 1 pick potentially in 2025 when the next of Matt Holliday's kids is available. I think that's a little bit crazy. Like if they can get the number 1 pick, like that would be fine. I think you want to pick as high as possible in a lost season. You don't know for sure that the draft class isn't going to be that great. It's just very college heavy at the top, and it's like a lot of second baseman and some first baseman and stuff, which isn't great, but we have a lot of time to talk about that. I just, the other thing that I will complain about, like as we keep doing these shows, is just the fact that they make us wait till the second night of the winter meetings for the draft lottery. It just seems like, there could be any number of evenings in October or November when there's like nothing going on where they could have this thing and like get some, some eyes to their event. And it's just like a half hour or whatever, and there's no players pick, but I don't know. It just seems like not finding out where the first round pick is until early December kind of doesn't really make any sense. And I had the same complaints last year, and the White Sox really didn't have any chance at picking like in the top 5. So it's just, another Rob Manfred thing that doesn't really make that much sense to me.
That's James Fox. He covers the draft very heavily, not only during draft season, but throughout the year, as well as one of the few who really does pay attention to the international market across Major League Baseball, and specifically with the Chicago White Sox. We are very thankful to have him on FutureSox.com. You can follow him at JamesFox917. I'm at Rankin906. Follow us on Twitter at FutureSox, and email us FutureSox@gmail.com if you have any questions, concerns, comments, you want to let us know about a thought that you want to hear our thoughts on. Give us some topics. We'll talk about them on the podcast, answer your questions as well. We really appreciate your time. If you could consider supporting us on Patreon, that's where we make our money. if you could consider supporting us on Patreon, it really does help us out. So thank you for your support and the dedicated listenership. We value you every single day. So we have 3 episodes a week here on the Future Sox podcast. This one releases on Tuesdays with myself and James Fox. So look forward to those every Tuesday. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you all next week.